As I hope everyone is doing well today. So in this video, I wanted to do a response to Rudy from Alpha Investments, specifically a response to a couple of things that he said in one of his latest videos. And the name of his latest video is called Rudy Talks to You Through a Shelf. Classic Rudy title. First of all, I want to say I really enjoyed watching the video. I'm enjoying a lot of Rudy's content these days. I've always just enjoyed when he talks to camera in his entertaining, to me, kind of, silly, goofy, off the top of his head, and very passionate style. I think he's very passionate about what he believes and what he says, and he cares a lot about all these topics, including thinks about it a ton. And it's both, I think, his passion and his livelihood and all sorts of things. So I really enjoyed the video. I think people should go and watch it. And I wanted to respond to specifically two things that he said in the video, because although I think that they bring up really important concepts and points that I think about a lot, I have a slightly different take on how I would answer each of those questions. So I wanted to share that in this video, in this sort of format. So in the video, basically, Rudy is answering questions from, I believe, from Patreon or from subscribers or some combination of his YouTube channel. And the two questions I want to touch on that were asked to him, and I'm heavily paraphrasing both the questions and what he said, but I think I will sort of get the general gist, and feel free to watch the video yourself. But those two questions are sort of, are we in a bubble? So are collectibles specifically in a bubble? And do people hate those who are successful? Sort of that concept, and how does Rudy deal with the hatred and the negativity towards him and his channel and his business and what he does, and then how can other sort of content creators deal with that sort of hatred of success? It was really that Rudy answered it. Do people hate success? I think the question was something more like, coming from a content creator, and how do you cope with that and deal with that negativity online? So I guess first thing, I'll address the first one. So are we in a collectibles bubble? So Rudy answers that, and I've heard him answer this a couple of times this way, that yes, collectibles are in a bubble, but that everything is currently in a bubble across the board. So collectibles, real estate, stocks, antiques, art, books, wine, cars, you name it, anything that has any sort of value, and it has gone up considerably this year. And that the reason for that fundamentally, as Rudy states, is just the printing of a lot more money. Two reasons: one, the printing of a lot more money, and two, that different spending patterns that are moving some of that money towards things like collectibles or online shopping, etc. I think both of those things are I think from a common sense perspective, seem very, very likely to be true. I think this will be a period where they are definitely going to study what happened and try to understand what caused all these things. And I think we'll have more information, and economists will have more information for us, and there'll be many books written about it, etc. Where I think that answer to me is not quite sufficient to the question is, are collectibles in a bubble, is when we really talk about, like, what is a bubble? Can everything be in a bubble, or is a bubble have to do more with a type of psychological mania that happens where an item that is inherently valueless, or should be almost valueless, becomes very, very expensive? Okay? And I think that I want to differentiate these two ideas, because I think that there are lots and lots of items in all of these markets, including the collectibles market, the real estate market, stocks, right, crypto, huge one that I didn't mention, that are very, have very high valuations right now and are very expensive, and would not be if the government hadn't printed so much money. I 100% agree with Rudy in that sort of way. But I also think there's been another side effect of all that printing money, where items that I don't think would have any value right now, and probably won't have value in the long run or into the future, have had a little bit of a bubble experience, a little bit of like a tulip mania, Beanie Baby mania, whatever experience around them. And I think that there are going to be certain items within, and I've talked about them on my channel. I won't go into any specific details here, but for people out there to reflect on this idea that when a lot of money goes into something, there can be a lot more speculation happens, a lot more greed happens, and then certain items start to uptick, and then a lot of other people jump in on those items. And that's very different than items that have a lot of meaning and significance and importance to the hobby, to collectors, to or companies that create really necessary, important products or services for people. That's very different than those companies becoming overvalued. It's very different when there are two different ideas here, right? We have a company or an asset that is very valuable and that probably will go up over time and do well over long periods of time because it's gonna it has good fundamentals and is going to grow based on their business model and or that the demographics of the interest in that collectible asset, versus an item that probably has no business being worth anything or almost anything becoming very valuable in this type of period. And so I think we're seeing that in the crypto market with certain altcoins. We're seeing it in the sports card market with plenty of modern and graded stuff and even some sealed stuff. And we're seeing it in Pokemon, in certain modern sections of the market, particularly now in certain Japanese boxes, and just very, very overvalued bubble-like mania activity that I think they're going to be much riskier type items. So yes, we're at risk for everything coming down at any time. There's a huge risk for recession and across the board, there's a risk for a depression to happen given the amount of spending, and all these things are real, but there are going to be certain assets and certain things that are much safer, and if you can afford to hold, I think will be there at the other side, potentially stronger and more popular and than ever across all of these hobbies and different asset categories. So I think that's really important. The second thing he says in answering "Are we in a bubble?" is that it's not. He says that it's not good to think about and worry about it, because if you think about it and worry about it, you're just going to drive yourself crazy. And at the end of the day, there's nothing you can do about it anyway, and that things will be and that everything will basically be okay. Just stay the course, etc., etc. And I think that there's really good message in there, but also a danger. So I think the really good message, and this is something that Warren Buffett, and it's something that I say to myself, my dad and I say to each other. My dad's a financial advisor, has been investing in the stock market his whole life, has been dealing with, losing 20% or 10% of his whole portfolio in a day. Every once in a while there's a tremendous crash that happens in a day or a week, and it's very painful. And being able to emotionally or psychologically weather those days, and also not drive yourself crazy with the fear of those days happening, is really important when you're investing. And so, or putting money into any sort of asset. So I think that that's a really good message, is how do you sort of live your life and not experience too much anxiety and worry, and have fun in these markets and not be too stressed out by a crash, particularly when you can't really do anything about it, I think is great general advice. I will say though that you can do something about it, which goes to my first part of the answer, which is to think about like what you're buying, what you're owning, what you're holding, and what is likely to do well in the very, very long term, and to have reasons to support that. I think is the way to lower both your financial risk, but also hopefully help you sleep better at night and have less anxiety. Not a financial advisor here, but that's whether you're buying stocks, bonds, real estate, or even investing like us crazy people in collectibles, where there's kind of a lot more risk, I think. Okay, so second thing I want to touch on in this video, so I hope those distinctions are helpful for people to think about when we talk about bubbles, and really what a bubble is versus just over valuations. And again, it's semantics, but at the end of the day, I think that semantic difference there in definition is really important for people to consider. Oh, and I do want to say one more thing on that point. So Rudy also says, and has said a number of times, and a lot of people say, right, time in the market versus timing the market, and that is definitely true with items that are actually going to stand the test of time. So no one can predict when the another big correction is going to happen, or some sort of global correction. And if you don't, we could have another 5 years, from today, of sort of slow growth, that if you're worried about and too anxious about the correction, you might, as I think he says in that video, like, curl into the fetal position, sell everything, and cry, in classic Rudy funny way. But it's true, right? That, like, that's not a helpful response, and that's not gonna help you um, capitalize on the potential upside of these markets, as well as enjoy and own things that you enjoy as collectibles. And so I think it's better to just mitigate risk by owning a lot of different things, and by also not putting anything too much, by not overextending yourself on credit and these types of things. So if there is a downturn, you'll have enough money to pay your bills, where you won't be forced to sell things that you don't want to sell into that type of period. So I think that there's a big, I really liked his answer, but there's also a big middle ground of where you're, and this isn't I think Rudy would probably like agree with everything I'm saying here, and Rudy's a very smart guy who clearly diversifies a lot in real estate and all sorts of things, and I'm sure the advice or the opinions or ideas I'm sharing with you guys is something I'm sure that he actually follows and does. Um, Next point here is, do people hate successful people? And do people hate Rudy, or are frustrated with Rudy or other big influencers, whether it's in the Pokemon hobby, Magic hobby, sports card hobby, what have you, just because, or primarily because, they're successful? I think it's a really interesting idea. Rudy had a pretty strong take in that video that he feels that people, or implied that a lot of people hate him because he's been very successful, and they're jealous of him, and or his success is like an attack on their failure, and reminds them of sort of their failure and what they should be doing, or where they should be in their lives. And there's absolute truth to that. So I think as human beings, we all can relate and understand that concept, that when we're not feeling good and when we're not doing good, and you see someone else who is succeeding or doing something in the manner in which you'd like to be succeeding, or doing, or how you'd like to be living your life, that there's a certain element, there can be, not always, but a certain element of pain that comes with that, because it's you feel your own shame, and it's a reminder of how you should be living and how you're sort of failing yourself, those types of feelings. And I think that with those types of feelings, it can be, unfortunately, if someone doesn't sort of if someone lacks the self awareness to realize that's where that feeling is coming from, they can blame the target of that feeling as, well, they must be doing something wrong, because no one could be that successful and be a moral or good person, because I'm a moral and good person and I'm not successful. These types of ideas. I think, kind of along the same idea, if anyone who's watching this has ever experienced that feeling of, when it could even be like someone you love and someone you really care about, or a good friend, something bad happens to them, and you have a feeling like that feels good to you, because it maybe you're struggling with something similar, or it makes you feel like, okay, well, this person I really admire and respect and is wonderful is having a hard time. It makes it okay for me to have a hard time too. It's a very sort of similar human process, and it's really not about the other person. It's about yourself, and about your own feelings of inadequacy, or lack of self-esteem, or self-confidence, or shame, or these types of feelings. So one thing I do want to say, though, because I think Rudy obviously has dealt with a lot of that and been attacked a lot, and there's been a lot of anger, and he's probably angry and has a lot of resentment. I think that, as someone like Rudy who is very successful, there is a certain amount of um, obligation that can come with that type of success, particularly if you're an influencer and you have a lot of reach and power and control. And so I think the counter argument to what Rudy is saying, which I think is also very true, is that there can be very legitimate concerns and criticisms of big influencers, of very successful, wealthy, whether it's success through wealth or success through family or success through happiness or some combination of all of those things, where we can view very successful people who have large platforms and be very critical of things that they do, because those things we have seen those things have a negative impact on our hobby, on other people. And so I think that separating those ideas is very important. And so for a person out there, when you're hate watching someone, are you hate watching someone because you're jealous and frustrated with their success? You think you wish you were doing what they were doing, and you're really, it's coming from that sort of insecure place? Or are you hate watching or negatively, feeling those feelings because the person is, you feel at least that maybe the person's taking advantage of their audience, um, doing things that you don't find moral. And then it goes to how best to express that. And in my view, starting your own channel and expressing some of those ideas, or trying to reach out and have conversations with those influencers, really giving people the benefit of the doubt. I think someone like Rudy, one, I'm sure, constant criticism that he's always gotten is he talks favorably about and tells people really to invest in. He says, he's not a financial advisor. He says all those things, but he also really makes content that inspires and encourages people to invest and buy into lots of products that he owns. And when people invest and buy into those products, that's good for him at the end of the day, right? And so even if he does believe that these things are really good investment and everyone's going to do well together and everyone's going to be lifted up, it's understandable that people have those secondary concerns of like, well, what is really his motive? Does he really believe these things are good for middle class and even some lower socioeconomic individuals to be putting lots of money into sealed product? Does he really believe that? But to be fair to Rudy, I do think he does a very good job for the most part of talking about diversification, and that a lot of this for most people is about entertainment and enjoyment and not really about investing huge amounts of money in the sealed product. Um, and I think when a person is trying to question someone's motives, like Rudy, to say, well, he doesn't really believe that these things are actually that valuable, and it's just sort of a pyramid scheme or some sort of scheme where he gets the product cheaply and then pushes it through his patrons and makes a lot of money off of all of them, right? These types of claims. I think that is far too critical and far too negative of what he's doing. I think what he's doing takes a lot of creativity and intelligence and guts, and it must be stressful and hard. And I would imagine he cares a lot. I get the sense that he cares a lot about people and a lot about his patrons. And I think when he shares his opinions, I think he gives them a lot of thought, and he's probably doing the best he can to give honest and accurate opinions. Will he be wrong sometimes? Absolutely. Will he give opinions that cost people a lot of money, in the sense that people will hear those opinions and because he's Rudy will listen to those opinions and buy into something a lot? I mean, if Metazoo and Flesh and Blood would not be anywhere near where they are without people like Rudy, Steve Aoki for the Metazoo side, and these other types of influencers, they just wouldn't be. And so I do think that it's understandable why people have a little bit of skepticism and doubt, and want to hold these people kind of responsible. But I also think that there's a little bit of an overheated over questioning of motives and morals. I think there's a middle ground where we can have adult, helpful, productive conversations. And to me, it's just understanding that Rudy might be someone who's very, even without not intending to be, but is very biased, and is going to be someone who might fall for some bubble sort of mania thinking and feeling, because he's so steeped in the cardboard culture and loves it so much that he might at times get things wrong because of that, and because he so wants it to succeed, and all these sorts of things. It's possible. Now, the reverse is also possible, that he's absolutely right about everything, and people who have listened to him, in the past have made money, and that people in the future, and when he says that the next decade is going to be the best decade in cardboard, that there's ever been, and things are just going to continue to grow, and he predicts that and says it explicitly, he might very well be right. And I do think that, him sharing his opinions, he's allowed to share his opinions, and I encourage him to share his opinions. It's enjoyable, but I think ignoring this idea, and this is for all influencers out there, that you don't have an impact on what your audience does is foolish. I mean, why do people pay us? Even on my small channel, I get contacted all the time for sponsorships and partners wanting to come and have me sell or talk about products to my audience, with the understanding that that my sort of opinions may hold some weight. Someone like Rudy's opinions is going to hold lots and lots of weight. Steve Aoki, Logan Paul, right? These big influencers. So I think that we all have a responsibility and a duty, and it's just about continuing to try to figure out exactly what that is over time. So that's going to be the video for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I just want to explicitly say, massive fan and admirer of Rudy and what he's been able to build and accomplish in the space. And like everyone else we talk about on this channel, I only talk about people that I really expect and admire, and I want to be a part of the community, and I want to help build up. But I may also have some critiques, and I think the way to build better communities is we should lift up our content creators and thank them and appreciate them, but also share our opinions where necessary of things that maybe could be done better or said more carefully, and that's just always going to be the case. So, and to be completely fair to Rudy, like, I don't think he misspoke or had any like poor ideas in this video. I just wanted to use the two things he talked about and as jumping points, I think, for a really good broader discussion about the, are we in a bubble and are collectibles in a bubble, and this idea of, do people hate successful people? So thank you all so much for watching, and I will have another video for you all, I assume, shortly. All right, take care.